January 2nd, 2021. Kirsten Brueggeman. 27-year-old female Kirsten Brueggeman was last seen on a security camera in Indianapolis, Indiana, walking across an empty parking lot at 2 a.m. The young woman was having a night out with friends when things went awry and she was left on her own, deciding after midnight to walk through the city herself in search of a bowling alley. Did Kirsten fall victim to foul play, or were there signs from her past record with the law that could help explain her sudden disappearance? Prior to the night she went missing, Kirsten Brueggeman was living with her parents in northeast Indianapolis while also working at a Cece's on the south side. She was described by those who knew her as being free-spirited and fun-loving, with a special place in her heart for animals. Kirsten also had a long history of run-ins with the law. Starting in her teen years, she had over 10 separate cases dating back to 2012, including a pending court date for drug paraphernalia that was scheduled several months after she vanished. The charges were mostly drug and alcohol related, but there were also charges for battery and harassment, resisting arrest, and leaving the scene of an accident. She even had a restraining order put against her by another person. Although investigators do not believe any of Kirsten's rap sheet is related to her disappearance, the past incidents could explain why she was living at her parents' home and depended on them for transportation. It could also explain her behavior that evening, as she did have a history of challenges when it came to anger management and good decision-making. The day Kirsten was last seen, she had spoken to her mother, letting her know she wouldn't need a ride home from work that evening because she had plans to go out and meet some friends for drinks. After work, Kirsten headed over to the Irish Mutt, a bar and restaurant in East Indianapolis. She was meeting up with 4 friends, her ex-boyfriend, several of his friends, and another young woman. During the course of the evening, an argument broke out among the group. It's unclear what the argument was about or Kirsten's involvement in it, but it did result in the friends deciding to leave Kirsten alone on her own at the pub. Her friends would later express their remorse at having left her behind that night, but it would be too little, too late. What happened next to Kirsten is still a bit unclear. She is believed to have left the pub just after midnight, around 12:15 a.m., with a desire to go bowling. There were several bowling alleys in the area, but none of them were a short walk away, especially on a cold winter's evening. No matter what her destination was, or if she even had one, security tapes that were later gathered by investigators showed Kirsten walking around the area, reportedly crossing through several parking lots, her destination unknown. The final security camera footage that Kirsten was last seen on puts her in the parking lot of the YMCA on Shortridge Road, which is adjacent to an apartment complex named Abbey Meadows. Detectives have noted the parking lot was fenced in, which would mean she'd have to climb the fence to get out, unless she never left on foot. Unfortunately, the security camera footage did not capture how Kirsten exited the parking lot. According to the Indianapolis Police Department, the camera focused on the YMCA lot which shut off and on, clipping out vital chunks of the timeline and leaving law enforcement and Kirsten's family with little to go on. Over a year after Kirsten was last seen by her friends and on the security cameras walking through the Indianapolis night, her family and investigators have no more information on her case than they did in the immediate days following her disappearance. So what did happen to Kirsten Brueggeman? Did the young woman climb over the fence and end up at an unknown location, or run into foul play while she continued to walk? Or did a vehicle enter the parking lot and pick up Kirsten, either against her will or not? Footage of the entire incident lost due to a camera glitch. It has been mentioned by some local residents that the area through which Kirsten was walking that evening is a dark and relatively abandoned industrial area, an area which is also known to have large populations of homeless or transient people. Was Kirsten walking through parking lots because of the light they offered in an effort to be safe, only to end up exposing herself to someone with bad intentions who may have been camping along the path, watching as she walked? Some have suggested she was headed to a drug dealer's house in the apartment complex adjacent to the YMCA parking lot. If that was Kirsten's destination, did she ever make it there? And if she did, what happened while at the dealer's apartment that made it so she would never leave again? The disrupted camera footage and a lack of eyewitness accounts led the case to grow cold. In March of 2021, Kirsten's family hired a private investigator and are currently offering a reward for any information leading to her location. Kirsten's parents don't believe she would have left on her own, noting she had not expressed any desire to escape or leave her life, especially since she had her beloved dog Tifa at their house. Kirsten's family have spoken with local media and are confident that somebody must know something. Her parents are holding out for a miracle while coping with the daily, never-ending pain of a missing child. Kirsten Brueggeman is 5 feet 2 inches tall and 115 pounds. She was last seen wearing a black waist-length coat, blue jeans, and a gray stocking cap, and carrying a white backpack. If you have any information on the whereabouts of Kirsten Brueggeman, or if you have seen or remember any detail which could aid investigators, please contact IMPD's Missing Persons Unit or Louth Investigations Anonymous Tip Line at 317-279-6082. June 26, 2020. Sandra Hughes. 54-year-old female Sandra Hughes was last seen on June 26, 2020 in the Sierra National Forest, north of Fresno, California. Hughes had been on a solo camping trip to escape COVID quarantines, flying from Hawaii to California in June. She drove to set up camp near Johnsen Meadows at Mugler Creek in Sierra National Forest. Did the freewheeling hiker run into physical trouble while alone in the wilderness? Or did she run into foul play? Several disturbing sightings, including one by a 3-year-old boy, have led investigators to believe Sandra Hughes may still be out there. Sandra had always lived an adventurous life, often moving around to different locations. So when she announced to family and friends she would be leaving Maui, after only living and working there a few months, to go explore the wilderness in California, it came as no surprise. The last time Sandra spoke with her family was on June 26th, when she had just arrived in California to begin her solo camping trip. By all accounts, Hughes was considered an accomplished camper and outdoors enthusiast. She had even trained to be a park ranger in college. What happened to Sandra between June 26 and the following several days have left investigators stumped and family and friends in shock. July 2nd. Hikers reported finding camping gear, such as a sleeping bag, strewn across the area known as Johnsen Meadow. 2 days later, on July 4th, another group of hikers who were visiting the park over the holiday weekend reported seeing a woman who matched Sandra's description walking through the forest. The woman was barefoot and appeared to have a bruise on her face. The hikers said they asked the woman if she needed any medical assistance, but the free-spirited camper, who they later identified as Sandra, refused any help and continued to go her own way. 1 day later, on July 5th, authorities located an abandoned campsite between Bear Sore and Minaret Road. There was no trace of Sandra or her car. After searching through the scattered campsite remnants, authorities were able to find several identifying documents which linked the site to Sandra. It was at this time authorities contacted her family. Although there was no sign of Sandra or foul play, her relatives and friends were surprised to hear about the state of Sandra's campsite, saying she was a very neat person who took her camping very seriously and would be completely unlike her to have such a messy and disrupted campsite. A day later, on July 6th, investigators found Sandra's silver Saab near Chiquito Creek, over 5 miles north of her campsite. Investigators believe the vehicle had been traveling at a low rate of speed, around 20 to 30 miles per hour, when it collided with a tree and later rolled down into a ravine. It is believed that the car crashed at some point between July 2nd and July 4th. There was no reported evidence of foul play at the vehicle, or any evidence to indicate Sandra was even the driver. Over the next month, teams from 6 California counties took part in an extensive search and rescue operation, which included aerial searches performed by the California Air Guard. But there was still no sign of the solo camper. That would change on August 9th, when 2 hunters reported having seen a woman who resembled Sandra leaning against a tree on Forest Road 5501, also about 5 miles from her campsite near Portuguese Overlook in Busor. According to the hunters, the woman did not approach them or motion to them in any attempt to make contact. They also mentioned she did not appear to be in any type of distress. That evening, the hunters realized the woman they had seen in the forest was the same woman featured on a missing persons poster in the area. The hunters contacted law enforcement and reported the sighting, while also adding that the woman in the woods appeared to have lost weight and was much thinner than the photos of Sandra that were used on the poster. Although Sandra's belongings at both the campsite and car were thrown around in a way that appeared careless to investigators, there were no signs of foul play. It appeared Sandra had simply disappeared. But why? One theory was that Sandra had injured herself while hiking alone, a very common occurrence, and possibly hit her head or in some other way became impaired. Perhaps she was driving for help when she crashed the car, sending her disoriented and on foot into the woods. Authorities were unable to determine whether Sandra went missing before or after the crash of her car, or whether she was even driving at the time. It's also unclear where the disturbance of her campsite fits into the timeline. Was it before or after her car left the area? And once again, who was driving? Was Sandra responsible for the crash and the destruction of her campsite? Or was it someone else, or perhaps several other people? There's been no evidence that Sandra was with anyone else at her campsite. Even if the free-spirited hiker decided to just wander off the grid, why would she crash her car and scatter her belongings? Was it an attempt to veer investigators off target? In late July, another sighting of Sandra would surface, and this one would be a little haunted. The Gorba family, from Southern California, was traveling in their SUV through the Madera Mountains when one of their 3 children began to speak with someone who was not in the car. According to the family, the 3-year-old child was pointing to a spot in a nearby meadow where he claimed to see a woman wearing a black shirt with blue hair, laying face down on the ground with her legs straight up in the air. The child continued to tell his parents that the woman in the meadow couldn't talk to him because she was dead, but that she needed their help. After stopping to check out the meadow and finding nothing, the family was so unsettled they ended the day early and went home, and proceeded to do what anyone might do in this situation. They posted the experience on social media, asking if anyone had any idea who or what their son may have witnessed. Not long after posting, they would get an answer. An officer from the Madera County Sheriff's Office reached out to the couple and described the case of Sandra Hughes, who was last seen in the area where the young boy had seen the woman dressed in a black shirt, jeans, and blue hair, the same clothing that Sandra was believed to be wearing when she disappeared. Several days later, 2 officers accompanied the family to the meadow where their son claimed to have seen the woman laying face down. A thorough search of the area by investigators turned up nothing. Although it's impossible to say if what the young boy saw that day existed in the material world or not, the woman he described did bear an uncanny resemblance to Sandra. He was even able to identify her in 3 out of 4 photos he was shown by investigators. Skeptics have suggested the sighting may have been a publicity stunt by the family, but could it be possible the child had seen Sandra Hughes that day in the field, and that she was able to disappear by the time the family stopped their SUV, and was long gone by the time authorities arrived? Since the summer of 2020, there have been no further reported sightings of Sandra Hughes or her ghost. Sandra Hughes is known to be self-sufficient, a nature lover, and enjoys relocating her place of residence frequently. There are no suspects or persons of interest in Sandra's disappearance, but her case is still active and unsolved. Sandra Hughes is 5'3" and weighs about 150 pounds with brown eyes and shoulder-length brown hair. As was mentioned by a witness, she may have lost weight since the time of these pictures. Authorities are asking anyone with information on the whereabouts of Sandra Hughes to immediately contact the Madera County Sheriff's Office at 559-675-7770. March 8, 2021. Sarm Heslop. 41-year-old female Sarm Heslop was last seen in St. John in the U.S. Virgin Islands on March 8, 2021. The former flight attendant from Southampton, England, was last seen going to dinner with her boyfriend before heading back to the 47-foot luxury catamaran where the couple worked selling charter cruises and also lived on. A late-night alarm and a missing woman have led investigators to be reliant on the one man who claims to have been there, but has very little answers. Without eyewitnesses or forensic evidence, it's unknown if Sarm even made it back to the catamaran that night she was last seen, and if she did, what happened afterwards on board remains a mystery. Did she purposely escape, jump onto a neighboring boat, or did she fall victim to an accident or domestic violence? Or is her case another casualty of faulty police work and corrupted island officials? Former flight attendant Sarm Heslop always heard the call of the sea. In 2019, while in southern Spain, she fell in love with boats and sailed across the Atlantic with a few friends, arriving at the Caribbean island of Grenada. It was there, in the summer of 2020, she met 44-year-old Ryan Bain and his 47-foot-long catamaran, the Siren Song. Bain had moved to the Caribbean from Michigan in 2015 after his divorce, and had made a new life for himself as the captain and owner of the Siren Song, which he operated for rentals as a luxury charter boat while also living on board. A few months went by, and Sarm decided in the fall of 2020 to leave Grenada for Europe, but just a few months later, she would change her mind and return to the Caribbean, this time to live and work with Bain on the Siren Song. The couple had only been living and working together a few weeks, when on Sunday, March 7th, they wrapped up a weekend charter job in the morning and were planning to spend the rest of the day relaxing. The boat was moored in shallow water 50 yards offshore from Frank Bay in St. John. A group of people aboard another catamaran just 100 feet away from the Siren Song reported seeing the couple that Sunday. This is a photo taken from that other boat showing the Siren Song as it appeared in the water that day. What happened that evening and the exact timeline of events is something that seems to have gotten murkier over time. A few major reasons for that is the lack of CCTV footage or credible eyewitnesses to corroborate the story and timeline, which so far has been told by Bain alone. What is known is that the couple went to dinner in St. John's that Sunday, with loose reports that alcohol was involved. How much and by whom remains unclear. Bain then said the couple returned to the catamaran around 10 p.m. and went to sleep. The boat was still moored 50 yards off the beach and in the vicinity of several other boats, including the one with travelers who had seen the couple earlier. At 2 a.m., Bain claims he was awakened by the boat's anchor alarm, which becomes triggered if the boat drifts overnight. It is at this time Bain states he first noticed Sarm was no longer on board. According to Bain, he became concerned and called friends for advice, eventually contacting the island police around 2:30 a.m. Bain then rowed his dinghy ashore and made a statement with the police, but there was no search of the boat. The following morning, on Monday, March 8th, at his request, the Coast Guard searched Bain's boat, but didn't report anything of interest. Then the Coast Guard and local police launched an air and surface search of the shoreline, water, and surrounding islands, which continued well into the night. Sarm's belongings, including her cell phone, shoes, and purse, were all found on board the boat, although it remains unclear if that's proof she returned to the boat, as these items could have been left on board all along, or even returned and placed there by someone else, or Bain himself. To explain Sarm's disappearance, the first set of theories revolve around the idea that Sarm did in fact return to the Siren Song that night after dinner. If she did return to the boat, where did she go? Did she fall overboard? Catch a ride on a passing boat, which according to locals often happened? Go for a late night swim? Did her and Bain have an argument, and she left the boat intentionally to return to shore? It was later revealed that Bain had been jailed for 21 days in 2011 on a domestic violence charge against his ex-wife, a disturbing background which some fear may have resurfaced in the few weeks the couple were living and working together. In a small bay, water can carry sound very effectively, but yet no witnesses reported hearing the boat alarm, or a woman in the water, or seeing Sarm later that night. Unfortunately, after the restaurant sighting, there was no evidence to indicate Sarm ever returned to the siren song that Sunday night. If she didn't return to the boat, and then disappeared between 10 p.m. and 2 a.m. the next morning, what did happen to her? While on shore, did Sarm encounter foul play after leaving the restaurant, or perhaps even left the restaurant with someone else? Or, as some have speculated based on differing accounts, that Bain and her had sailed somewhere else for a few hours that evening, to a more distant and remote location, a location she may not have returned from, possibly falling victim to an accident or being passed as human cargo to another waiting ship. Without a forensic search of the siren song, police remain unable to confirm if there are any additional clues which may be on board, anything that could perhaps give investigators and her family a clue as to what happened that Sunday. After several weeks of searching, with no signs of a body or any other clues to indicate what happened to Sarm, the VIPD announced that it was going to look into several unconfirmed sightings of Sarm on other islands, stating they believe she may have left St. John for St. Thomas. Although Sarm's lack of an ID or any funds, and the publicity about the case, make it difficult to believe she was traveling independently around the islands. As the year progressed, the case went cold, and Virgin Islands police did not search Bain's boat, and without any evidence against him, he was allowed to leave the area, which he did. Then in November 2021, reports surfaced in the media that Bain had been laying low in Grenada, about 500 miles from the Virgin Islands, trying to sell the siren song, now rechristened Orion's Belt. News of Bain attempting to offload the siren song before a full forensic search of the boat could be completed brought renewed calls by Heslop's family and friends to have law enforcement intervene in the investigation before it's too late, and the boat is sold, and any evidence that may be there is lost forever. The VIPD continues to seek Bain's cooperation in its investigation, stating they need his voluntary involvement since he was the last known person to have contact with Sarm. But to date, Bain has not responded, apart from a letter written by his attorney. Sarm's parents have made several passionate pleas for both the British and U.S. authorities to step up the investigation, but so far, the case remains unsolved. As of the making of this program, no warrant has been granted for a full forensic search of the siren song, and although he is a person of interest, Bain has not come forward to offer any further assistance. Sarm Heslop is 5 feet 8 inches tall, with long dark brown hair and a large, colorful tattoo on her shoulder of a seahorse, butterfly, and flower. If you have any information about the whereabouts of Sarm Heslop, or if you have seen or remember any detail, please contact the Virgin Islands Criminal Investigation Bureau or Crime Stoppers, U.S. Virgin Islands at 800-222-TIPS. September 30th, 2020. Sydney West. 19-year-old female Sydney West was last seen in San Francisco, California on September 30th, 2020. The college freshman had taken a pause from her classes at UC Berkeley to recover from a recent concussion. She was last seen at around 6:45 a.m. at San Francisco's Golden Gate Bridge, but due to the fog and the smoke from recent wildfires, she was quickly lost on the bridge's security cameras. Apart from being a beautiful national landmark, the Golden Gate is also a bridge with a dark reputation, with recent statistics estimating that there is one attempted jumper almost every other day. Is Sydney's case another sad chapter in the history of the bridge by the bay? Or did Sydney fall victim to foul play, amnesia, or perhaps something more personal? Sydney West had grown up in Pleasanton, California, before relocating to North Carolina with her parents and younger sister sometime after 2017. She's described by her family as a sweet and goofy girl who had a strong love for the outdoors, animals, the environment, and music, playing piano and writing her own songs and lyrics. She often appeared at open mics around her new hometown in North Carolina. While in high school, Sydney developed another passion, for volleyball, where she excelled on her school's team both in California and North Carolina, where she was a varsity co-captain. After graduating in 2019, Sydney decided to take a gap year and journeyed across the globe to Australia. It was during that time she began to post blogs where she described her personal struggle with depression and anxiety, and the pressures she felt in her life. In the fall of 2020, Sydney moved to the Bay Area to begin her freshman year at UC Berkeley. Unfortunately, Sydney was still struggling to recover from a concussion she had gotten earlier that summer. Details about what caused the injury remain unclear. Further complicating her plans to begin college, pandemic protocols enacted in the spring of 2020 meant that Sydney's classes would be conducted online with no in-person classroom time. This arrangement, along with her continuing recovery, quickly led her to make the decision to defer enrollment a year and begin instead the following fall in 2021. With college temporarily on hold, Sydney did not return to North Carolina, instead choosing to stay living in the Bay Area with family friends. But she did maintain close contact with her family, having a long phone conversation with her father the night before she was last seen. He later stated he expected to speak with her the following day. Unfortunately, that would never happen. The morning of September 30th, Sydney took a ride-sharing service to the area around the Golden Gate Bridge known as Crissy Field. She was known to be carrying her phone, headphones, and a backpack. It was not unusual for Sydney to go to the Golden Gate, either for exercise or to take in the amazing scenery and to take pictures for her blog. The last thing known about Sydney's whereabouts is security camera footage from the Golden Gate, which shows her entering the bridge's pedestrian walkway. But unfortunately, intense fog and an unusually high level of haze from recent wildfires made it impossible to see her for long. Investigators were unable to locate any camera footage of her exiting the bridge, although that could be explained by the lack of consistent or clear footage that morning. The Golden Gate is monitored 24/7 by an army of cameras, which tragically have recorded many desperate actions. But that was not the case with Sydney. All footage from the Golden Gate that day was reviewed by investigators and didn't show anyone jumping. The following day, her family would make multiple attempts to reach her and became concerned by the lack of a response. Soon after, they contacted local authorities and reported Sydney as missing, mentioning her personal safety may be at risk due to depression. It wasn't long before investigators located Sydney's backpack near the Golden Gate, but it contained no indication as to where she might be. Law enforcement would eventually turn the backpack over to her family. The only items that have not been recovered were Sydney's headphones and her cell phone. Sydney's family has always believed that someone on the bridge that morning, either walking, running, cycling, or driving across, must have seen their daughter. But if there are any eyewitness accounts out there, they have yet to be made public. Although from the beginning, there have been tips coming into investigators on this case, none of them have panned out. Furthermore, law enforcement has had very little to say about Sydney's case, other than they do not believe it to be foul play. There has been no activity on her social media or bank accounts or phone since that morning. So what did happen to Sydney West? Although many believe Sydney's disappearance at the Golden Gate points to only one outcome, some have suggested there were other valid reasons for her to have been there. First off, Sydney was an athlete and was also slated to be on the rowing team at UC Berkeley, so it's not unbelievable that she would go out for some exercise in the early morning. Many have pointed out the fact that her headphone and cell phone were never recovered, two items she would have had for a run. But it doesn't explain the backpack being left behind. Did she ditch it on purpose, or was it left by accident? Some have questioned why she would have brought a backpack if her intention was to jump. Questions then immediately arose about the driver of the rideshare she had taken that morning. Although there are many horrible stories about drivers crossing the line, it was not the case here. San Francisco police were able to locate, contact, and interview the driver as part of their immediate investigation, and the person was cleared as a suspect and has reportedly always been cooperative. Over the years, authorities have made changes to the Golden Gate in hopes of deterring people from using it as a dark destination. This includes safety nets and increased cameras and patrols. Although all of the current safety nets were reportedly not in place by the fall of 2020 when Sydney was there. Another point that observers of the case have made regards eyewitnesses that morning. Although the Golden Gate and San Francisco in general are a high foot and car traffic area, they weren't so much 6 months into lockdown, when most businesses and workplaces were still closed or partly shuttered, meaning far less people out on the street or exercising on the Golden Gate. So given the early morning hours, the decrease in traffic, and the fog and smoke, it's likely fewer people would have had the chance to see Sydney than under normal circumstances. But it still doesn't answer what happened to Sydney West. Did the troubled young college freshman succumb to her mental health demons? Or was she simply at the bridge that morning for some exercise, but instead ran into foul play? Although there have been no credible sightings or tips that may suggest a different outcome, some observers have speculated that she could have been kidnapped or abducted in the foggy, early morning hours. Others have suggested that Sydney may have orchestrated another gap year, or perhaps longer than a year, and simply chose to leave her life and the pressures to excel that she'd expressed feeling from her family and her impending future in college. If Sydney didn't make it across the Golden Gate that morning, it's possible no physical evidence may ever be found. And without any indication of her plans that day, or more information about her mental state being made to the public, we may never know what happened. Sydney's family continues to have an active presence online, with a website and social media accounts offering support and updates. They have also hired a private investigator to continue exploring the case. As of the making of this program, there have been no additional evidence, leads, or reported sightings made public regarding Sydney. Sydney West is 5 feet 10 inches tall, 130 pounds with light brown hair and blue eyes. She was last seen wearing dark leggings, a light teal hoodie, and Vans brand sneakers with a tropical print. It's possible she could have been wearing her hair in a bun or have been carrying a black backpack. There is currently a reward for any information which could lead to finding Sydney and bringing her back home. Her family stresses that no detail is too small, so if you remember anything from that foggy morning, please reach out to the San Francisco Police Department or contact private investigator Scott Dudek. November 28, 2012. Emma Fillipoff. 26-year-old female Emma Fillipoff was last seen at the Empress Hotel in Victoria, British Columbia on November 28, 2012. The young woman had moved to the beautiful Canadian West in search of personal freedom and growth. Despite difficulties getting settled into her new home, Emma had plans to try the van life, only she would never make it onto the road. Did the young woman fall victim to a stalker or other foul play? Or did her personal struggles with mental health get the better of her, pushing her to disappear the very day her mother arrived in town to bring her home? Or does footage of an unknown man tearing down her missing persons poster while claiming she was fine and living with him indicate Emma may have kept a secret from everyone and vanished by choice? In the fall of 2011, Emma Fillipoff decided to make one of her dreams come true and move from her hometown of Perth, Ontario, to explore the wilderness and beauty of Canada's west coast. Although she would arrive in Victoria without a job or place to live, the young woman was confident things would work out, and she even told friends she believed something amazing would happen out in British Columbia. In the first few months, Emma was staying with a friend and working at a cafe while looking for her own place. But when that first winter hit, her life became even more transient. Emma would leave the cafe job and her friend's apartment, ending up living anywhere available, including a hotel, several boats, camping in the woods, even living in a tree. By February of 2012, Emma had begun living at the Sandy Merriman's Women's Shelter, where she would stay off and on until she was last seen later that same year. After a dark winter for Emma, the summer of 2012 was looking up. She had landed a seasonal job at a busy seafood restaurant in Victoria's Harbor, where she would work until late October, even telling staff she had plans to return the following spring. Reports of Emma's life around Victoria that summer paint a picture of a creative and curious young woman who was intently interested in personal solace, reading, nature, and living freely outside of what she saw as the constraints of modern society. She was reported to have often been seen talking with the harbor's artists and street performers, as well as its homeless community. Those who knew Emma that summer also recalled she had taken on a new kick of clean living, quitting alcohol, coffee, and sugar, while also becoming a vegan. During this period, those around Emma said she appeared to be losing weight and was becoming almost monk-like. That summer, Emma also purchased a used van, with the intention of one day taking up the van life full-time. But the van she had purchased couldn't be driven as is and had to be towed from spot to spot, a hurdle which would require significant repairs before she could enjoy the freedom and mobility she had always craved. When Emma vanished, it was reported she had been searching for an affordable mechanic to help get her dreams on the road. According to witness reports, Emma had mentioned multiple travel destinations once her van was roadworthy. These included other spots in BC, Mexico, San Juan, California, Costa Rica, Japan, off-grid at an unnamed location in the woods, and visiting relatives. Although sociable with others who shared her offbeat path, Emma always kept a distance. Those who knew Emma said she mentioned her family very little, as well as not sharing much about her personal history or thoughts. Back in Ontario, Emma's family and friends had a similar experience. They remained in contact, but were unaware of her lifestyle around Victoria, or that she had been living in a woman's shelter. Since arriving in the fall of 2011, Emma's roommate and others who had spent time living with her reported that she had displayed a series of increasingly odd behaviors, such as OCD-like rituals and what appeared to be manic episodes. And less than a year after her arrival, Emma had gone from easygoing and friendly to withdrawn, agitated, and frightened. Some were concerned she was worried about an unnamed man she had dated in BC years earlier while attending culinary school, although there was no indication that the man saw Emma or was even aware she was living in Victoria. In the weeks before her disappearance, staff and friends at the women's shelter observed Emma acting in extreme ways they described as depicting symptoms of paranoia and depression. These behaviors included moving furniture from the shelter to across the street, claiming she had heard voices from them. She also was reportedly selling or giving away her personal belongings. Unfortunately, what happened in the final days before her disappearance fails to shed much light on the young woman's plans or state of mind. November 20th. Emma was seen on CCTV at the Victoria YMCA, apparently entering and leaving the building several times over a 14-minute period. Some have speculated she appeared to be hiding from someone, although that's unclear in the footage. November 23rd. Emma finally reached out to her mother and began a series of emotional phone calls. During these calls, she would eventually ask to return to Ontario and would make plans to do so, only to change her mind on a later call, and then change it back, and so it went back and forth over the next several days. November 25th. Emma had a tow truck bring her van to the Chateau Victoria parking garage for what authorities believed was part of her preparation to return to Ontario. November 28th. Emma and her mother had a final phone call, at which point her mother was determined to fly out that same day to visit her daughter and help her return home. Around 6 p.m. that evening, Emma arrived at the woman's shelter to learn her mother was on the way. Shocking the staff, the young woman left abruptly, evading those who followed her by taking a taxi to the airport, only to have the ride cut short due to a lack of cab fare, even though she had over $2,000. Around 7 p.m., an hour after storming out of the shelter, Emma was recognized by an acquaintance walking barefoot outside the Empress Hotel in Victoria. This prompted them to make a call to police and report a woman in distress. Unbelievably, when the police arrived, Emma was still there, and they were able to speak with the troubled young woman for over 45 minutes, ultimately letting her go after concluding she seemed to be no threat to herself or anyone else. That would be the last time anyone would see Emma Fillipoff. When Emma's mother arrived at the shelter around 11 p.m. that evening, her daughter was nowhere to be found. After Emma was a no-show for the shelter's midnight check-in, she was reported to the police as a missing person.
At the time of her disappearance, Emma was believed to be in an extremely vulnerable and emotional state. When investigators traced back Emma's actions on the 28th, they would uncover even more bizarre behavior and no answers. Around 8:30 a.m. that morning, Emma appeared on security footage from a local 7-Eleven purchasing a prepaid cell phone. She'd returned to the store later that afternoon and purchased a $200 prepaid credit card. Following her disappearance, authorities and volunteers searched the greater Victoria area, including its many parks and islands, even putting a dive team into the harbor. Police would eventually receive over 200 tips about Emma, including several unconfirmed sightings, but ultimately came up with no new information as well as no indication she had left the island or where she may have gone. Investigators did quickly recover Emma's van, a red Mazda MPV, in the Chateau Victoria parking lot. The vehicle contained practically all of her belongings, as if she had packed to return home or drive somewhere else, or perhaps store the belongings while she disappeared for a while. Among the many items found in Emma's car were her passport, library card with recently borrowed books, digital camera, clothes, a pillow, various knickknacks, and a laptop. It was at that point Emma's trail would run cold for investigators and her family, with the exception of a few unusual tips. December 5, 2012. The prepaid credit card Emma had purchased at 7-Eleven the morning she was last seen had been used at a gas station in the area, but police would discover it wasn't her using the card. Instead, the car was used by a transient local man who claimed he found it a week earlier, but had been drinking too much to recall the exact location. After the man was questioned by police and submitted to a polygraph test, he was cleared of any connection to Emma's disappearance. The next tip would come 2 years later, in May 2014, in Gastown, British Columbia, about 3 hours north, 75 miles from Victoria. Over 2 years after Emma was reported missing, a man was captured on a convenience store security camera, taking down and destroying a missing persons poster of the young woman, a poster which was advertising a $25,000 reward. The man told the store's owner that Emma was his girlfriend and that she wasn't missing, only avoiding her family, which he claimed she disliked. The man in the video was wearing a green shirt with flame tattoos on his arm. He also had a limp. Although the store owners contacted police, the man in the video has never been identified. In 2018, 6 years after the incident took place, a tip was reported by a young man who had picked up a soaking wet and shoeless Emma by the side of the road on the early morning of November 29th, 9 hours after she was last seen. This is significant because it's the first time Emma was confirmed as being seen after the evening of the 28th. The man, who was on his way to work, stated she was heading to a friend's place in Colwood, on the island about 10 miles from Victoria, but he was unable to make it there, so he dropped her off at a Petro-Canada gas station before continuing to work. The man would later claim he didn't make the connection at the time that the woman he picked up was Emma, later telling Emma's mother he was also worried he'd be implicated in her disappearance, although she has said she doesn't believe he was. The man claims Emma was calm while driving in the car, but otherwise appeared to be paranoid and in distress. Emma's disappearance has been widely covered by Canadian media and true crime channels, but yet no information has come to light, and her family and authorities are no closer to understanding what happened or where she is, although her mother does believe she left Vancouver Island. So what did happen to Emma Fillipoff? Did she choose to disappear and start a new life, rather than face her mother who had come to bring her home? Had she ended up missing by choice, in a relationship with the man who took down the poster in the store? Or was she being held against her will by the same man who took down the poster? Or is there another part of the story that explains her staying in the women's shelter? Was she being stalked, or had she been threatened by someone? Had she made a plan to go off the grid that she never told anyone about? Or did the symptoms of her mental health observed by those around her eventually get the better of the young woman? In late 2021, 9 years after she was last seen, Victoria Police released several before-unseen photos of Emma in a hope they may trigger a memory and keep her case in the public eye. Emma's family is still actively searching for her and simply request she contact them and let them know she is safe. Emma doesn't have a history of drug use or a criminal record. She's known to be a big fan of libraries, children, and animals. She may be caring for an elderly person or living outdoors. She's described as shy and quiet with an artistic, sensitive personality. Emma Fillipoff is 5 feet 5, 90 to 110 pounds, with typically very long light brown hair and brown eyes. She has a tan complexion and likes to wear knitted hats. She had no known piercings or tattoos at the time she was last seen. If you have any information about the whereabouts of Emma Fillipoff, or if you recall meeting her in another city or campground, or road, or restaurant, please contact Victoria Police Department or call Crime Stoppers anonymously at 800-222-TIPS.